Yeah. So I was
Okay.
just saying that we haven't lost enthusiasm for this topic, which, after 2 years, you might think we were beginning to feel. I think we've said everything there can be said about purity, but we keep finding more. And I would have to say that you've taken the prize for the best title of a session, Caroline. The exquisite nature of purity, revealing a path to freedom, authenticity, and true beauty, speaks volumes of how you see things and the depth to which you go with a subject. Do you want to just say a few words about what your feeling was when you came up with that title? What was your sense that you were trying to convey?
Mm. I don't really remember so much. I tend with titles and things to find it rising within me. I move pretty much intuitively in life, so I can go into my head, but mainly I like to follow an intuitive inspiration. And so when Sister Ranjan asked me and asked for a topic, that's what came up for me. And I think why? Because I remember when I first started with the Brahma Kumaris, and someone said to me, you can't just follow purity, you have to learn to love it. And I think that was a very key comment in those days. I didn't understand it. I didn't really know what she meant. But over the years, I think what that comment has sort of stayed as an echo in my journey. And what it's done is it's oriented me, I never know which is the right one of those, but has oriented me towards the fact that it is exquisite. Like, it's hard to put into words because it is about the feeling of what it is to be in a state of purity or connected to what is pure. And it's so refined, and it's like a filament, it's like gossamer, it's like something, it's exquisite. And then I was thinking, okay, it's its nature, purity, it's exquisite nature. It is like its way. And what does it give you? It's in and of itself, it should be enough, but it is about freedom, which I think is about flow, where you just move without resistance in life, and I think, imagine that. Imagine really just not any fear, no resistance, no stopping anywhere, no doubt, no sort of second guessing, no hiding, no pretending. It's just flow, freedom, and then truth, which is this sort of, again, a pristine state of power in a way where everything is absolute. And it's not about anything to do with anyone else. It's about a stability and a certainty without force. It's power that enables you to be strong and solid and clear. And then beauty. I was trying to think of other words. What is another word for beauty? And I think that's it. It's the truest nature of the soul in its unbridled form. We even know, Philippa, that, the beauty industry, which is, I don't know if it's beauty, but everybody trying to kind of look beautiful, feel beautiful, is the biggest industry in the world today in terms of money. So much, billions and billions and billions of dollars that is spent on people trying to recover this feeling of being beautiful. And I think purity is is what gives us really when we're in our own essence. So it's big, but it's so like that.
It's really resonating for me. We've got Brother Bridge Mohan over in London at the moment, and we had an evening with him last night. And one of the points that I really took from him, and it was the first time I've had this realization, although it's really obvious, but we were looking at the topic of nourishment and what makes us happy. And he was saying that anything, because we're inhabiting a physical body. So anything that is physical, whether that be a house, a car, anything that you can touch, is only going to make you happy on the level of your physicality. But what truly makes us happy are the things that really resonate with us at the soul level. And those things are not tangible, they're not physical. And they are things like beauty and truth and purity, because they tap into the real essence of who we are. And that's why we love these things so much, because they are a breath of fresh air in terms of getting back to the essence of who we are. And I thought that was a very interesting point, that that's why we love purity, because it's who we are.
Yeah, and I think it's a really slippery one, purity, because like in the Brahma Kumari's teachings and the path that has made most resonant sense to me over the last 30 years or more, is that purity is about that. I always thought, like anything pure is 100% itself. So that's really what purity is. That's a kind of a base definition. So, but often people can become moralistic or judgmental or puritanical, and that misses the point altogether. And so you can, like you're saying about the physicality, there are certain conditions or certain practices that in a spiritual path can be put in place in order to arrive at that experience or that state or that stage of pure essence, of 100% me. But the conditions, those practices create the conditions for me to arrive in that experience. They are not purity. So, whatever the practices different religious paths put in place, they are not purity in themselves. They actually help bring us to the experience of our essence. So things like, looking after my thoughts or my food, such beautiful practices around food, making sure that, talking about it, nourishment that Bridge Mohanbai was talking about. Do we really nourish ourselves with food, or do we just eat? When I cook, am I understanding that if I put the vibration, the essence, this pure being who I am, if I put the very best of that, the love and the power and the happiness, energy into the food as I'm cooking, then that will come back and nourish the cells of my body, and those cells of my body will also help me stay awake to my own essence. It's just this extraordinary kind of system. And even the thing of, in Raj Yoga practice, we have a practice of celibacy. And that's a really powerful one, because often, that can become puritanical or moralistic. And it really is about understanding we are in such a web of human connection. And I love the work of, we're in Texas at the moment, and one of the great Texans of the world at the moment is Brené Brown. And she talks about how we are hardwired as human beings for connection and belonging. And so when we disconnect from ourselves, we connect with everything and everyone else. And we go looking for this feeling of connection and belonging in all the wrong places, looking for ourselves, our own connection, our own state of belonging to all things. And in doing that, we lose ourselves, we lose our purity. So celibacy is such a great practice that helps me cordon off again and come back to my own absolute pure essence. And it's not about anything other than being able to return to that. And of course, our practice of Raj Yoga, the connection of the soul, just this pristine self connecting with the source, God, the supreme, the one, that reminds me again who I am. And so these conditions, these practices create the conditions. So all of this kind of constant feedback brings me into the state of my own authentic being. And from that, there's no judgment, there's no superiority or inferiority. It's just an exquisite state of being that allows life to flow and flourish. So it's an extraordinarily deep topic, and I'm not surprised you're still going and discovering.
Mm. Beautifully put. But I am aware that we're two women who've been on this journey for 30, 40 years. And we're able to talk like we are because we have been through what we've been through. But if I can just rewind to the time before you came across Raj Yoga and the Brahma Kumaris, what would your understanding of purity been? And how have you been able to explore it openly and experience it with an inquiring mind? And what have the resistance points been along the way? Because even though it's exquisite, there's something within the soul that just says, nah, not doing this. This doesn't give me what I'm wanting from life. How do you pass through those moments?
Great question. And okay, let me wind back. I don't know that I would have understood purity at all. My life before this practice was all over the place. I was someone who was quite lost. I didn't look it from the outside necessarily, but I felt deeply lost. There were times when I was in my teens or my late teens, 20s, lost as anything. And, I used to, my main memory of or thought of God was I used to pray to get out because I was so intensely dramatic and sense of suffering. And so my search there wasn't search. I kind of didn't know. I was in darkness, I would say. And so purity, I don't know, I would have even heard the word. It was so far away from my lifestyle. I partied a lot. That was my world. And it was very, very shadowy, very kind of in that sense of hopeless. That was the word that I lived with. So purity wouldn't have even made it into the realm. So if someone asked me what it was, I don't even know I would have had anything other than maybe something puritanical, or the go-to version, which is, talk about children's purity. And then that might have been something that could have connected me, although my childhood was a little bit challenging as well at home. So for me, one of the things that I say when I I remember I was delivering something, right? My partner at the time, who became my husband, and that's how I came to Brahma Kumaris, because he was diagnosed with terminal lung cancer. And I'd heard, someone gave me an interview they'd heard on radio that talked about meditation being key to anyone recovering from cancer. So we came in touch with the Brahma Kumaris, did the course, and then someone asked, Michael was a voiceover expert, and they asked him to voice a documentary that the BKs had done for Global Cooperation. And I was delivering the voiceover to the centre. That was a very long story full of detail, nothing to do with purity, but here we are. I'm at the centre door delivering the video back in those days, a VHS video. And someone opened the door, and I remember feeling this wave of energy. It was Carmen Warrington, who does a lot of the meditations. And I thought, I want to be able to come back here. So it must have been before I'd done the course even. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is, wow. It was so like a fragrance that I'd not ever felt anywhere in my life before. And she just took it at the door, and I was like, I couldn't see in. I didn't know what was going on behind. It was this sort of interesting architecture in the building, which was a bit sort of a little bit like Hogwarts, Harry Potter's school. It looked a little bit like that, which I didn't know back then. So it was always, once I started to discover, it was like, wow, there is something here. And I've definitely grown up as someone quite needy and defensive. And so the attraction was there, but to be able to make the most of it, really in Raj Yoga too, I think, is the connection with God. And that was, I had an amazing introductory experience, which was just before Michael, my husband, died. So we did the course, and six months later he died. But during that time, I had this experience of God when I was just hopeless again. I went, no, not again. I'm going to be alone, and God help, what am I going to do? And I really just became very desperate. And I was sobbing, and then all of a sudden in this, I said, I can't do this anymore. You have to do it, in my mind. And I remember saying, God, I don't know who you are. I don't know what you do for a living, but I can't do this. You have to do this. And in that moment of surrender, everything got taken away, all the pain in my heart and the suffering and the crying just stopped, and I was completely washed like a cascade of love. It was just, and I thought I was in love, right? And it was extraordinary, but this was like another level. And then wrapped up in peace. And I'll share the message. I got a very clear message at the time. And I'll share it because I feel it's connected to purity and this question of resistance. And the message I got was, you don't own this soul. So another thing of, you don't own this soul. You're like two actors who've come together to play a scene. You don't have to know what the next scene is. You just have to play this one the best that you can. And the way to do that is you find the joy in every moment. And then it finished. But that energy of love and of peace stayed with me for a long time after. So he passed 10 days after that. But it stayed with me for a long time, and it was a presence, and people would come into the house and they would be so sad coming in to say goodbye. And then they when they left, they weren't sad because the presence was so strong. And I think for me, if I can stay really deeply present now in this moment, it's there. It's all there. The purity's there, but fear takes me out of it. My unresolved hurts and pain from not just this life, I suspect, but others pull me out of it. My things that trigger me in other people, my attachments or the emptiness, these pull me out of being present. And if I go to my head, I'm also out of it. And often unresolved things take me to my head because that's a safety zone if I get intellectual, or rather than being present. And so my resistances are about that too. I don't necessarily like to feel the feelings that rise up when I'm very present. They rise up. What do I do with those emotions? So I can resist at that level. I can resist and not being able to tolerate the emotions that are present, that I have to go through to be able to come and sit back in the very essence of who I am. I can resist the imposition of the rules. I can be a little bit, well, who says, and things like that, and resist a club. Big resistance for me when people create a club of us and them. I find that really untenable. Purity is not for anybody else. It's just for me. It's not about making us a group of special, superior, anything. It's a gift I get to experience and I get to share through being, but not imposing. And it's so precious. It's not a whip, it's not to be. So there we are. They're the ramblings of that question.
Incredible. Amazing. And I've heard many people's stories, but yours is really quite extraordinary in terms of the timing of it and what you were going through at the time and how that sort of dovetailed with your grief, this sort of twin edge of grief and bliss that was going on during that time. And I also really recognized that experience of seeing it for the first time when Carmen opened the door. I had exactly the same experience. And I think it's worth remembering that for those of us that have grown up in the West, not only have we never really thought about the word purity, we've also never really encountered it. Because in India, you have so many religious groups that are practicing a kind of pure life, and you see it on the streets, and you go into the temples and it's an incredibly pure atmosphere. For us, the churches are dramatic and moving, but they don't give you that instant hit of purity. And so as Brahmakumaris, I think it's really important to be aware that for many Westerners, this will be their first encounter with the concept, with the feeling, with the energy of purity. And as you described, it kind of speaks for itself. You don't have to say anything. People feel it in their belly, this sense of something being very, very different.
Because, Philippa, you can feel it because someone sees you. When you're in that pure state, your vision, the way you look at others, you see that in them as well. It's a resonant connection. And I think the biggest, it's a dramatic statement and an absolutist one, but I think the biggest pain in most people's lives is we don't feel seen as who we really are. We don't see ourselves and we don't feel seen by others. So purity means someone sees you. And that is so beautiful and powerful and such a gift. Yeah. Sorry to interrupt.
We spoke this morning briefly, and you said something which I've been thinking about all day, about when you come to meditate on the divine, and you're told that the very first and foremost quality of the divine is that it's pure consciousness, it's pure being, it's complete and utter purity, and that in order to forge that connection, we have to create a space within us that is worthy of that connection, and that somehow the practices of external purity create a pure temple, a vessel, whatever you want to call it, which then is on the same frequency with the divine, and we can connect through that energy of purity in a way that I'm not sure you can if purity isn't there. Would you go along with that?
It's interesting, because I can say that when I had that extraordinary experience of surrender and connection with the divine, with the source, with all, that I wouldn't say I was, doing conscious effort to live a pure lifestyle. I was messy, and I had moved, but it was the surrender and the kind of demand for support and help in that moment that gave the gateway. And so, however, and I've had in with the conditions, having been very strong on the practices after starting with Raj Yoga, very 100% as much as I could say, that I had desert years where my heart was like wood or stone. I couldn't experience that connection at all, even though all the conditions were in place. However, I never gave up. And why I talk about the head is because I think for me, I had escaped into my head to escape the pain of maybe that grief as well, even though I had an exquisite experience. But I had a very, difficult childhood, adolescence, things that I ran away from in my own life. I didn't want to experience. And one of the things I've had to come back to is to let all the pain of that have enough power to tolerate the release of that. Because what I discovered was that feeling is only one channel. So if you shut down all the feelings that you don't like, you also shut down the feelings that you do want, like bliss and happiness and love. So you disconnect from feeling, and a life in the head can be entertaining for a while, but it's not satisfying. So whilst I agree with what you're saying in that all those conditions all the practices create the conditions to be able to have that connection, there are other things at play as well. If you're not experiencing that state, then you have to check, is my heart open? Am I able to experience open-heartedness? And if not, then there's some work to do there as well. But I don't want to disagree at all with what you're saying. I just think it's a complex thing, and each one's journey is so unique, right?
Yeah,
There's layers.
And nothing is ever cut and dry completely like that. I have a theory, which is that when you first start practicing meditation, like any good salesman, you get a free sample. They try and hook you in, and like the experience that you described, you made no effort for that, it just came to you. And we go around in this bliss state because we're flying high with this free sample that we've been given. And then slowly you use up your free sample, but it was enough to make you want to have that experience again. And you need to find a way of making your connection back to that experience so that you can sort through all the rubbish which inevitably comes to the surface, because the brighter the light, the darker the shadow. And if you're wearing blue and black clothes, you don't realize that they've got marks on and they're dirty, but you start going around in white and every little imperfection is in technicolor, and you have to face that and you have to work through it. And that's why so many people go and do something else, because that work is hard, but
Yeah.
what you want to get to on the other side of that hard work, and you keep going because you know what it is that you want.
Because you have a taste, and I think this is what you're alluding to. You get your free sample, and I remember when Michael went to the first class with Charlie, who was is our senior teacher and who I'm sure has been on this series. So he went to the first class alone. I had to do something else that day, and he came home and he brought home a cassette. In those days, for people who don't know what a cassette is, it's a tape in a plastic container, and you listened to the audios, and it was Sister Denise and her meditation day one. And we sat, cross-legged on the floor and listened to this. And my power of concentration was very minimal, but I would say no more than 3 seconds of experience of this really pure, pristine sense of, oh my God, that's it. Not even the experience I had later, which was of God. And I'm happy to use that word to describe that at that time. But this was, what I had been looking for in all these years I'd lost. And that 3 seconds was enough to carry me through the desert years and the desert moments. And so I always say to people, don't focus on where you can't meditate. Don't focus on where you're going wrong. Don't go down the self-criticism track that the world is in of we're not enough, I'm not doing good enough in my practice. Really find the little windows that gave you a taste of something and go back to that, because that is truth. That is purity. And when you kind of open it up a little bit more, don't say, yeah, but that was just a second or 3 seconds. Yeah, just edge your way in, squeeze in there and bring out the bellows and make it bigger. Just taste it, lean on it, inhale it, because that will make that, a tiny bit of light in the dark will start to make all the difference. Don't negate it. Really, it's a jewel, and it will make all the difference all the way through to the end.
Extraordinary. And I absolutely know what you mean by having that 3 second experience that can keep you going for years. And I certainly have had that. But can you imagine if you got to a state where that 3 seconds was like an hour, or was like your
Life.
way of being? Can you imagine what your life would be like in that state all the time?
Yeah. Well, and that's it, isn't it? That's for me, that's what Raj Yoga is to understand that is my eternal nature. That is really who I am. I saw something, it was on Instagram the other day, that said, the paradox is that you have to create a personality that survives life and its stories and its difficulties. But there comes a point where if we want to live in the truth of who we are, we have to let go of that personality. It has to go. And so for me to live that 3 seconds as the truth of who I am, Caroline, who has been the construct of survival, has to be able to disappear. And that's another series altogether. But like you say, imagine, that work is really important. Grab that 3 seconds and start to imagine what my life would be like. Who would I be if I was able to hold that more and more? And just, the word desire is like considered bad in spiritual places, but to have this sort of strong longing, this yearning to return to that. I don't even have to create it. I have to look after the conditions, but to return to the beauty of that, my gosh, longing, that will pull me there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Funny enough, a brother Bridge Mohan told a story where he spoke to the founder Brahma Baba and was kind of complaining almost that, I have had this one lovely experience in meditation, but for a long time I've had nothing now. What am I doing wrong? And Brahma Baba just said, well, focus on the fact that you have had that experience, because if you've had it once, you can have it again. And just sit with it and let it come to you. You don't have to grasp and kind of strive, just fall into it. And if you've done anything once, you can do it, and it will come again. And of course it did, and again and again. I'm aware if anyone would like to ask a question. I haven't invited you to ask questions, but if you would like to post a question in the chat, then please do so now, and I can just feed that in. But before we start rounding things off, I did want to ask you about this life's work of yours of looking at the feminine. You wrote this incredible book, The Four Faces of Woman, with a beautiful meditation CD that goes with it. If you're at all interested in the feminine principle and haven't read this book, I can't recommend it enough. But do you have a sense of obviously the empowerment of the feminine, but the potential of the feminine when it's informed by this purity and what that can achieve?
Yeah, it's such a big topic right at the last few minutes. What can I say? I think the power of the feminine is so beautiful, but interestingly, it's not more beautiful than the masculine. Both are exquisite because they make up purity, right? When you bring the two together in balance, in their non-biological sense, but in the principles, as you highlighted, they're both so they're life. They're life. Together they are life. And when they're in balance, then that is, I think, purity. There's something special. And so the rise of the feminine without purity, without this presence, I'll bring it back to presence, because purity it can be a concept, and as I've said, a lot of moralizing around it. But if I say that, well, I know when I'm really present, here and now, I'm not anywhere else, I'm just present. That is the feminine holding, and it allows for things to be born. And from that birthing, the masculine can come into play to bring into outer action. And so, you know, in the BKs, the ultimate sort of symbol of that togetherness is talk about is, you know, the iconography of Lakshmi and Narayan. And I remember asking a group of Indians once, because I don't know, it's not part of my culture. I said, is it ever said Narayan and Lakshmi? They said, oh, no, never. I said, no, because the feminine principle comes first. It's Lakshmi and then Narayan. So that in our lives, in our own being, it's like we have to be present before we come to action. We have to be interconnected and connected with all things, which is the feminine. So we look at Mother Nature, this extraordinary, you know, you were talking about the trees in our conversation offline, that a tree would keep giving and giving and giving of its fruit. But if it's damaged, it doesn't. But this connectedness that exists underneath the forest floor, the mycelium, this network of ongos, of fungus, of, you know, means that there's communication. And if this one's damaged, it gets to rest for a year or two, and the others take up the slack, and they are more abundant in the year that this one doesn't give fruit, because it can't, it needs to recover. And so the rest of the forest or the rest of the orchard gives more. And so it's not this sense of competition or lack or scarcity. If you have more, then I get less. In that state of presence of the feminine principle, we know that there is enough for everyone, and it's not physical. Abundance and prosperity, which is part of this topic, right, come from an understanding and a being and a belief that everything that is needed flourishes and comes through. And if I go back to, I lived in Chile for 13 years in South America, and one of the things that the indigenous Mapuche people say, that they know that, for example, if they go to the earth where there's clay and they take the clay to make their pots or their bowls, they have to be very present, very conscious as they take that clay. If they're greedy and they take more than they need, they come back and it's dried up the next time. Now, I find that a really interesting thing, if it's true, if it's not true, but it makes sense that there is this purity of order, of give and receive. Out of presence comes order, and purity is order as well, without being controlling. So it's such an incredibly deep topic, isn't it?
It really is. It really is. Maybe we save that whole topic for another time, because I loved what you're saying about, true purity is the harmonizing of both masculine and feminine, and you need both of those. When you look at the whole kind of global debate that's going around with, gender differentiation and, unity of whatever, there's definitely something going on there. There's a search for balance. There's a search for restoring that harmony of opposites. But as you say, it's a big topic, but it does impact on the environment as well, because if you interfere with the purity of Mother Nature and her ability to operate in equilibrium and restore and give, but give back to herself, if you mess with that, then you're in a hiding to nothing. So these conversations may sound a little bit esoteric, but they actually feed right back down to where we're at in the world right now, and where we need to be going. We have literally scratched the surface, Caroline. We'll have to do something again.
I have to apologize if we've been too esoteric or floaty or fluffy, because it is actually really practical in how to bring happiness, you know. And for me, I wouldn't still be around. Absolutely not, if it was just theory. I needed practical, applicable knowledge that made all the difference to my way to navigate through life. So, yeah, I apologize if it's been a bit too airy.
Not at all. Not at all. You've been sharing from your heart, and that's been so beautiful to witness. And thank you so much. A lot there to think about. But it is that time where we're going to take our conversation into meditation. And if you could guide us with some words that will help us into that experience of what you've been sharing, then we'll close with that. Thanks, Caroline.
Okay, so
yeah,
maybe we can just, someone's got a microphone open, and maybe that could be closed.
yes, so
Yeah. Okay, lovely. Thank you. So everyone who is there now, you may have children running around, there may be neighbors doing their lawn, or, you know, you might be running a little late and you've got to get somewhere. Just allow yourself 2 minutes now, because this 2 minutes could be something of such great beauty that touches something deep within you. Just focus, concentrate, be with me, be with us for 2 minutes only. So very gently letting yourself just settle. You can imagine, you know how just animals, dogs and cats, they find their way in the sofa or their bed or wherever they are, and they just move around till they find their place and they settle. So just allow yourself to settle so that you can settle down inside yourself and drop into your heart center. Settle. And that you have nothing else in this next minute and a half that you need to do. Nowhere to go, nothing to prove or achieve. And in this settled place, if you could just allow everything to be as it is. And bring your own sense of self into the middle of this settled place. Tiny point. And at this point, emanates, radiates naturally. There's no effort in that. It's really natural. And it automatically has an open line of connection to the one, to the source, the divine. And it's just about tuning in, nothing more. So easy, just tuning. being open. Allowing and receiving. As you allow this natural relationship connection to be present, somehow, and knowing that this is what is natural and that there's no hard work in it. It's just about coming home. And when we come home, we feel safe. We belong. And we can be welcoming and hospitable to others. Very gently, just allowing yourself to become aware of whatever it is that is around you at the moment and the time of day, and the invitation is to try and move into the next part of your life today with a sense of this settled in myself experience, not moving out of it too much or coming back to it when I can. Om Shanti.